Last year, the number of riverboat passengers on the Rhine was over 1 million. This year, the number looks to be greater still. Every village has its new un-German hotel with English-speaking staff. And every church and castle and hill has been written and rewritten about in guidebooks until nothing new can be said. This is from a story in the New York Times in 1852. It just goes to show that the concerns we hear about overtourism are not new. The massive rise in people traveling in the late 19th and early 20th centuries meant that by 1920, stories like this were common. The particular cities were getting overcrowded. Now, whether the article's goal was to inform readers that they might be out of luck if they wanted to get a hotel in Paris next year, or to decry that some places really were just now too crowded to be worth visiting, the message was the same. And we see it today when such stories are still the mainstay of newspapers and magazines, as millions more people around the world get on planes. And the issue is always raised of over-tourism. Again, sometimes from the aesthetic perspective of, oh, it's just too crowded. It was 10 foot deep just to get a glimpse of the Mona Lisa, or that there's actual damage being done to historic sites or fragile ecosystems. But again, this has a long history, this narrative of over-tourism. And it's important to note the word, it's not over-travel, it's over-tourism. The judgment is in there of who is doing too much traveling. And many of you will be familiar with the distinction between the traveler and the tourist. Note, the tourist is always them and the traveler is us, and there are far too many of them and just enough of us. And this really does go back to the first package tour companies of the 19th century, when Thomas Cook made travel more affordable and available to new slices of society. And in the 20th century, the automobile brought new kinds of travel to, again, more people. We got the new type of traveler, the sightseer, who was also judged pejoratively by other people. After the Second World War, you got the rise of the long-distance bus tour, the if it's Tuesday, it must be Belgium kind of travel, which again was disdained by people saying, oh, that's not me. I'm having a real travel experience. As though somehow traveling around Europe on a bus is not real. But then when it comes to travel, real and fake are sometimes hard to discern. We've all seen those Instagram pictures of a person in some beautiful, pristine landscape, capturing that moment of their communion with the environment, that transcendent experience. Not shown are the 30 other people waiting to take the same photo. And again, it goes to show that anywhere you think of as pristine and unspoiled and remote is not. It is on the tourism highway. But this is always the issue. We want, when we travel, to have this personal, unique encounter, to experience the people, the landscape, the culture, in a way that we feel won't be possible if we're sharing it with other visitors. And of course, there's a competitive element there too. We want to have gone to places that other people haven't. And we all know people who like to boast of having been to somewhere trendy before it was cool. When this picture of climbers on Everest was published, I thought, why does it look so familiar? I'm sure I've seen this before. And I racked my brain and I remembered. It was this. Prospectors in the Klondike Gold Rush of 1898, climbing the Chilkoot Trail. Again, going to show that if you've heard of a destination, millions of other people have too, and there's a good chance they'll have gotten there before you did. And of course, the travel industry knows this. They know that we want this unique experience when we travel. And they use this in their marketing. Think of every ad that you've ever seen for a tropical vacation. Notice how the beach is always empty? Think of Airbnb and their slogan of stay like a local. As though somehow renting an apartment off the internet is something that a local would do, as opposed to maybe renting a room at the Hilton. I mean, who are we kidding? It's impossible for us to travel somewhere without the fact that other people have gotten there first. We need the infrastructure, the roads, the highways, the railways, and yet we want to feel that we're doing something unique and distinctive. And so many people try to get past this impossibility by looking for things like the reconstructed village, the fake ceremony, the ersatz, the inauthentic and the pursuit of the authentic. The photo selling the lie that that traveler was alone on the hilltop. And what really is the answer? Because the fact is, if you're traveling somewhere, it's only because other people made it possible. And I don't think it's fair to make this distinction of the traveler versus the tourist. My travel, of course, which is essential and worthy, and your travel, which is a waste of time and energy and destroying the planet. I mean, and yet this is how this discussion is often framed. And the thing is, if you do travel somewhere, it's only thanks to other people who've made it possible, who've built the roads, the airports. If you got a cheap airfare, it's only because there are hundreds of other people wanting to travel that route, making it a viable service. That cute little boutique hotel you found in Bucharest, you didn't just happen to find it. It exists because of tourists. Tourists like you. And that, I think, is the answer, except that we are all tourists. Embrace it. And if there is concern that some places are being damaged by overtourism, places like Venice, maybe the true answer is to admit that we're all part of the problem. And maybe if you really love Venice, don't go. Stay home. Drink a Bellini, read Henry James, it's all the same. And remember, if you think you need to get away to experience something transcendent, think of Henry David Thoreau when he wrote Walden, that ur-text of retreat. He was basically in his mother's backyard. So if you think you need to get away from it all, you maybe don't need to go as far as you think. Thank you.